Garden Foundation, and I am very happy to see all of you here. The foundation, together with the library, puts on this monthly series on the second Saturday of each month. We have today the Butterfly Garden, and I'm pleased to introduce you to Cindy Moran. She's going to do a two-part series here, a discussion of the plants, and then she'll take you to the Butterfly Garden, which is the work of the Baton Rouge Garden Club, and you'll see the building as you go out by the Butterfly Garden. When they first started about 3 years ago, there was nothing but dirt there. And you will see what the garden looks like now. It's absolutely beautiful. Cindy's a licensed landscape horticulturist, and she's the former owner of a wholesale nursery, bedding plant, and greenhouse. She's received many awards in her career through the years, and you'll see her special touch in the Butterfly Garden when you get there. She's the president now of the Baton Rouge Garden Club, and there are applications for membership to the Garden Club out at the front desk where we registered if you're interested. And she wants to talk to us now about the nectar and host plants, and I've already received a lot of questions about milkweed, so I'm sure she'll address those. And then we will see these beautiful butterflies as we go out into the garden. So please welcome Cindy Moran.
Good morning. Well, she's made quite a bit of my introduction, which to tell you that we're here on behalf of not only the Baton Rouge Garden Club, but the library, which has very kindly given us this nice facility. When we first planned this program, we thought, well, we'd have it all outside. But since this is such a nice big space and everybody can wear their masks, we get to enjoy the air conditioning. We won't have to stay quite so long in the garden itself where the temperature is not so great. So in any case, the Independence Botanic Foundation is sponsoring these programs, and they are supporting the Butterfly Garden, of course, with the Garden Club. So I want to point that out. So I want to start with a little bit of history. Who remembers when this was an airport? Yeah, okay. Well, it's come a long way from being an airport. It started being an airport in 1931, and there were planes flying here all through the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then, of course, the neighborhood got built up around it. And the main library was built here on this property when it was still an airport in 1968. I remember a couple of things about the old main library. One was that you had to get a key to get into the restroom. And I don't think they'd get away with that today. And the second was that my garden club study group in the 90s used to plant flowers in the two beds flanking the sidewalk to the entrance. So you may remember that. There were two beds and they were being used as trash cans, and so we decided to put flowers in there at least to discourage people from throwing their trash, and we did that for quite a few years. In the early 70s, my son was waiting for his dad to pick him up at the orthodontist office over there, and a plane took off and crashed right in front of him into the pines in front of the insurance building over there. So it's not too long after that they decided to close down the airport as being dangerous, and the property all belonged to East Baton Rouge Parish. So the mayor-president at the time, who was Woody Dumas, gave part of the property to the state police across the Independence Boulevard, and the rest of the property to Breck to use as, they started using it as an athletic field. In 1989, the garden club approached the mayor about putting a building here. No, I'm sorry, it is 1979. And so the mayor very kindly told us to talk to Breck about putting it. Now, the reason that we were able to have a building was that way back in the 30s and 40s, the garden club was founded in 1929. They raised money and they bought some land. So nothing happened until that, but in the late 70s, all of a sudden somebody wanted to buy the land. Well, fortunately, the land, guess where it was? At the corner of Essen Lane and Perkins Road. So needless to say, the garden club got $120,000 for their land, and they took that money and went in with Breck and built the garden center over here, which was the first building, other than the library, of course, in this area. So the garden club planted a butterfly garden in the 1990s, and close to the building over there. And it was a nice garden, but after 20, 25 years, gardens need to be renewed. It had gotten choked with ruellia, the big tall ruellia. Literally, it couldn't be weeded. It was pretty much irreparable. So when Breck decided to build the parterre out here, they came to the garden club and asked us if we were interested in having a butterfly garden. I'm not sure they even knew we already had one. But in any case, we jumped at the opportunity on the premise that, yes, we would develop part of the parterre as a butterfly garden, and they could razz the old one. So Claire Fontenot, who helps work with Breck, took some plants out of there, salvaged them, and we started the new garden. So this butterfly garden here was we planted it in December of 2017 and dedicated in May of 2018. And the garden club is 100% responsible for not only the planting and the maintenance, but the weeding. And the reason for this is, although we'd love to have help from Breck, and then they do give us pine straw, we have a hard time figuring out what's a weed in there sometimes ourselves. Because like a good perennial garden, things do come up. We do have volunteers. So we take care of it, we irrigate it, we do everything that's necessary to be done. Now, as I say, we do have some financial assistance from the Botanic Foundation on that maintenance, so I don't want to leave that out. Now, although we call this a butterfly garden, it's actually a pollinator garden, and we have registered it with the National Pollinator Garden Network. And that is an organization based of conservation and garden groups, volunteer civic groups, and some federal agencies. And the goal of this agency, of this group, network, is to create more pollinator habits, which would include native bees, wasps, moths, beetles, birds, bats, and a lot of critters besides butterflies. So let's think about what is our goal in planting and maintaining this garden. Well, the number one goal is for it to be attractive 365 days of the year to people and to the pollinators. And we're so fortunate to live in a subtropical climate where this is possible. So we do some color changes. We plant flowers in the wintertime when maybe there's not very many butterflies around, but hopefully there's people. There may be more people in the winter, since when it's this hot, we don't have a lot of visitors besides the butterflies. So that means that the garden is in constant change. It's like any garden. It's never the same from day to day. And we work to make it attractive so that people enjoy coming to it week after week, because there's always something new. So of course our second goal is to establish host plants. And those are the plants that the butterflies lay their eggs on, and then the caterpillars eat that plant. And so you have to realize, too, that when you're having a host plant, that means that sometime what you see in the butterfly garden will be bare stems, because hopefully the butterflies are eating them, making chrysalis and hatching into the winged version of butterflies instead of being just caterpillars. So you have to have a certain tolerance for damage. And of course, you know, September, we had originally planned this program for April, and actually it looks like a September garden in that some of the summer things are flagging, and this is normal. Gardens in Baton Rouge are not necessarily at their most beautiful in September, but it's at this point really right now when it's the most crucial time for butterflies, particularly the ones that are migratory. So the ones that are now flying south to get away from freezing temperatures are passing through. Then, of course, the next reason we plant is for nectar plants. And these are plants that are available for the adult flying form of butterfly to nectar on. And they, of course, they need that source too. So it's important to have nectaring plants at all different times of the year, of course. But again, right now is one of the critical times. Another aim in choosing plants for the garden is that we try to do as many natives as possible, because of course there are many plants that come from other places, exotics, that our butterflies will nectar on, but most of them won't be host plants. So we do try to plant a lot of natives, and of course we're not attracting just butterflies. We want to attract native bees and things that need these natives that can't live on exotic plants. So it's important to have a high percentage of natives. And of course another aim is education, which is why you all are here today. And hopefully you're going to enjoy going outside, and we're going to introduce you to a lot of the plants, and in some cases give samples, and we'll do some interesting things outside. Okay, I am not a butterfly expert. I'm a horticulturist. So I had to do a good bit of research in order to give this program today, and it was fun. It was fun learning about the butterflies that we see in our garden. Hopefully most of y'all have the handout with the pictures. Yes, good, good. So I'm going to talk about, these are just five varieties of butterflies that you'll see in the garden. There are many more, and frankly, when we go to look at the garden, if you're going to ask me what that is, I won't necessarily know. So excuse me on that. Okay, so everybody knows about monarchs. They're the poster child of the butterflies. And everybody, of course, knows about monarch migration. And but this is not something that only monarchs do. There are many butterflies that have mass migrations. Now, of course, we also know that monarchs depend largely when they're migrating on native milkweeds. And of course, as America becomes increasingly paved, but increasingly agricultural or suburban, or where we're losing the places that our native milkweeds would grow naturally, it's becoming harder for them to find their host plant, because of course there's several generations, and so they have to find a host plant, lay eggs, hatch a caterpillar eats, comes a chrysalis, comes a butterfly, and then keeps flying south toward Mexico for the winter, of course. There's controversy about what kind of milkweed you should plant for your butterfly. There's been some notions, some problems saying that the tropical milkweeds should be banned, but further research has really shown that as long as you treat your tropical milkweeds properly, that is, really cut them to the ground and let them come out the following year, that it's not a problem. And I will say this, that the tropical milkweeds are much easier for you to grow, and quite frankly, much easier for the producers to grow. It's actually very hard to grow the native types if you're doing it in mass production. They kind of have a mind of their own, and they come up where they want to come up, and they don't necessarily thrive in a greenhouse. So I would say don't worry about buying the tropical varieties because they work very well. Now, as far as nectaring goes, the monarchs like to nectar on the big flat flowers. That's hard to say, like zinnias, tithonia, and also very happily they like goldenrod. So if you think about goldenrod being a weed, it is, but it's a valuable weed because it is a nectar source for the monarchs. So next I'd like to talk about the Gulf fritillary. It looks a little bit like the monarch, but if you see from your picture, a little bit different. And we probably have more Gulf fritillaries in the garden than any other butterfly. It's one of the top varieties for our climate. And of course, it's orange like the monarch. And there are a number of species of fritillaries besides the Gulf fritillary. When I was in the bedding plant business, we grew pansies, and we had a fritillary that laid eggs on the pansies. And so we would sell these pansies and say, well, you know, you get a free fritillary with these pansies. And they were cute little things. They look like the Gulf fritillary caterpillar, but they don't sting. And it was very nice of them. When they got on the pansies, they only ate the flower. So, you know, what's a flower here or there? Be my guest. And we wouldn't have to worry about having foliar damage, which would be more problematic if you were trying to sell the pansies. The host of the Gulf fritillary is the passion vine, or passiflora. And we have, at least in the butterfly garden when we go there, one dead passion vine from last year where they just ate everything and it couldn't recover. So we often do have naked passion vines in the garden, simply because the fritillaries have been hungry. And really, now, not every passion vine will feed fritillaries. If you grow the red one, real pretty red one, they don't touch it. So if you're trying to attract butterflies, try to find a variety that they will be attracted to. They don't like the red one. And they nectar on just about anything. They like the Pentas, the little flowers, the big flowers. They're not worrying about what it is. They'll nectar. So next I want to talk about the black swallowtail. And they are hosts on fennel, parsley, carrots, and dill. And the first caterpillars in the butterfly garden that I got to show to some kids walking by was a black swallowtail on fennel. They love the fennel, and the fennel is kind of open and airy, and you can see them easily. So even if you don't want to eat the fennel, plant it in your vegetable garden. And the caterpillars do have a horn and that releases the bad smell. And also they look a little bit like the pipevine swallowtail, which is a poisonous swallowtail. The black ones aren't poisonous, but if the bird sees it, he may think it's the other type and avoid it. And they like to nectar on the flat flowers, the zinnias and so forth, but also on cluster blooms like Pentas and things that have a lot of small flowers in an umbel. Longtail skippers are little guys, And Longtail skippers always look like they might be something else, and actually they are. They are actually a genus that's kind of in between butterflies and moths, so they look like a cross between the two. And they like to, their host is anything in the legume family. Legumes like peas and beans, and in our garden, cassia plants or sennas. They like to nectar on the small flowers like the pentas, things like that. Now the longtail skippers are also tropical and also migratory. So right now they are on their way from regions where frost is coming to head to the south. And we may have more longtail skippers the warmer we get, because they can only exist in tropical climates where it doesn't freeze in the winter. And we've had several winters like that with hardly any freeze. The cloudless sulfurs, which are the pretty yellow ones, their host plant is the cassia again, or senna. Cassia's the old name, senna's the newer name, but it's pretty much used interchangeably. If you go to the nursery to buy a senna, they may not know what it is. They're still calling it a cassia. And it's interesting that the cloudless sulfurs can nectar on plants that have a long throat because they have a long tongue. So they will nectar on things that some of the other butterflies can't get to, like a petunia or something with a long throat on it. So they can find nectar when some of the other butterflies can't. A lot of times the caterpillar color depends on what flower they're eating. And I have found this with caterpillars on when we used to go snapdragons. If it was a red snapdragon, it was a red caterpillar, etc. And apparently this is also true with the cloudless sulfurs. And they prefer red. So we may have red caterpillars or yellow, or depending on what they eat. And I also thought it was interesting that this particular butterfly is just as migratory as the monarchs. And I read somewhere that if you take a line from Gainesville to Baton Rouge, we're about on the same latitude. There are as many cloudless sulfurs migrating south right now and later as the monarchs, but they migrate lower so you can see them better, whereas the monarchs stay up high. So anyway, plant legumes in your garden if you'd like to attract the cloudless sulfurs. So now, this is about right, it's 10:30. We have about a half an hour we can spend outside. Everybody, it's that way. Well, let's see. We're going to go out these doors right here, is that right? Are we going to leave this way or go through the library out this door and go this way? Just follow the crowd, you'll find us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll see y'all outside. Chased tree, and so I wondered where that name came from, and it seems that the name for Vitex is monk's pepper, and it got that name in the Middle Ages because that was their saltpeter. They put the seeds from the Vitex on their food to suppress desire, and that's how it got its name as a chaste tree. So anyway, it's a nice small tree, and it does attract butterflies when it's blooming. Some people call that the lilac. That's our version of lilac, since we can't grow lilac. Okay, shrubs. We do plant Budelia, which is a butterfly bush, and they're over here underneath this cassia, which is trying to hog all the sun from them. And I will say that when you read about butterflies, the first thing they say is to plant butterfly bush. But quite frankly, for us, it's not a very good plant. It doesn't grow very well. It tends to some of them do. I don't recommend it, particularly the dwarf varieties. They just don't hack it here. Now, actually, further north, Budelia is considered an invasive plant because it seeds and comes up everywhere. So we don't have that problem, but actually, it's not one of the better butterfly plants. Let's see, Duranta. Do we have some Duranta to show? Duranta is also called scour. Neck berries. Shrub. Here we go. What you can see it. Now, by the way, I'd like to introduce this lady who's bringing you the plants. This is Marianne Atkinson. She's the chairman. And so she's the one that comes over here 2 or 3 times a week and takes care of the garden and irrigates and weeds. And so anyway, she's really the one that deserves a tremendous amount of credit for this beautiful garden. Next we have an Acanthus. Acanthus is over here, this Acanthus. Called Flame Acanthus with a little tiny red bloom. And as you can imagine, that would attract hummingbirds too. It's a good hummingbird plant. And I brought this plant from Texas. I got it over in Austin. It's a dryland plant. So that means when we plant it in our garden, it gets huge and flops all over because it's getting so much water. So, but it doesn't rot, which is a good thing. Next, I will talk about the swamp mallow, which is the great big white flowering over at the end there on, actually not in our part of the garden, it's over in the empty part of the garden there is not ours, it belongs to Breck. And they're getting ready to put hibiscus in there, which is another mallow. And of course, that's a host. It's not only a host and a nectar plant. And as you can see, we planted one hibiscus, Moschudos is the name of it, but it has seeded and a whole bunch of babies have come up around it.
There are plenty of them over on the other side of the rose garden also.
Okay, more over beside the rose garden. Okay, then we have a Tacoma, which is, you want to break a piece off so everybody can see it? Tacoma's got big yellow flowers. It's another plant that's native to Texas, and is, as you can see, it's a good host nectar plant. Yes, nice yellow flowers. And a lot of times now it will freeze to the ground in the winter. A lot of these things that we consider tropicals or perennials will freeze to the ground in the winter and come back up in the spring. And a very interesting plant is Turnera. Do you have some Turnera you can show them? Turnera is a little plant that comes from Bermuda. And so we say it's native because it's a Caribbean plant. And it is attractive to butterflies, bees, birds, a lot of pollinators. And it has a little mallow looking flower. And it's called Turnera because it was discovered by Mr. Turner. So he got famous. So those are all things that we consider shrubs. Next we come to perennials.
Which is shrubs are for the main.
One of our fanciest perennials is this pagoda plant right here with the orange flowers. Pagoda plant.
The one that's got the red blossom.
The one you talking about?
This one right here with the orangey red, big, huge red blossoms. That is an exotic. It's not native to here, but it definitely attracts butterflies, and it's so showy that we certainly like that. And it's Clerodendron is the name of it.
Wait, that's a Clerodendron?
Yes.
Because that's what this man's asking.
Yes, that's clerodendron, but commonly, if you're looking for a common name, pagoda plant. Pagoda plant, yep. We have a lot of gaura, G-A-U-R-A, gaura, which is a native. And, in the spring, it really, really did put on quite a show. Yeah, most of it's in the back, so it's hard to get to. Here we go. This is gaura. Little tiny flowers, but thousands of them. And then we have goldenrod, which is the big plant here by the tree, or also over here. And of course, that's definitely a native. And of course, that's the one that everybody thinks it causes hay fever, and it doesn't, because the pollen on it is sticky. Yeah, ragweed is the one that causes the problem. It blooms at the same time as goldenrod. And actually, the Brits took this goldenrod over to Britain and fiddled with it, and it's one of their main plants. So, one of their main horticulture plants. So it's been fixed. Lantana, I think everybody knows what lantana looks like. Last year we had tons and tons of lantana, and since it didn't freeze in the winter, we had too much lantana. So we pulled up a lot of the lantana. She's going to come out with some right now. But lantana is grows like a weed for us. And if you want to, yeah, here we go, lantana. Everybody knows that, little bitty clusters of flowers. So we have several kinds of milkweed. Could you gather several kinds of milkweed? We have several kinds of milkweed in the garden, and as I discussed over in the air conditioning, most of the milkweed that you buy in nurseries is a tropical milkweed, which means it came from Mexico or South America or other places. And but our butterflies, our monarchs, I mean, after all, monarchs do go to Mexico for the winter. I think it's perfectly good. One reason that monarchs have to have milkweed to eat, their caterpillars have to have milkweed, is that not only does it feed them, but it gives them the poison that makes them immune to bird predation. In other words, the birds won't eat them because they know that they taste bad, actually. And so the viceroy, which looks like the monarch, doesn't get eaten because it looks like a monarch. So in other words, the birds don't eat these caterpillars, and that's because they all have a host of milkweed, which is poisonous. So in any case, just if you're growing the tropical variety, you just want to cut it to the ground in the winter and let fresh growth come up. You don't want to let the foliage from one year go into the next year. And how about the Californicus? Let's have a piece of Californicus, Mexican, the one we call. When I bought this one, it was labeled as Mexican milkweed. But after doing a little research for this program, I discovered it's not actually Mexican milkweed. It's from California. It's called Californicus, of course. And it is a fuzzy and gray and doesn't look anything at all like the other milkweeds. And it does make a bloom. So yeah, she can walk down here and let that one. And it makes a great big shrub thing. It gets about, well, I think ours is about 5 feet tall now. Anyway, there are also a couple of native milkweeds called tuberosa and aquatica, and I'm not putting them down at all. If you can grow those, you should, but it's just that they seem to be a little more difficult. It's like I say, they have a mind of their own where they want to grow. If you're really trying to attract and raise butterfly caterpillars, you should try to have a fairly large stand of milkweed. In other words, one plant won't necessarily do it, so try to have multiple plants if you have space in your garden. We have a lot of Pentas in the garden. That's aquatic milkweed that she has in her hand. That's one of the native milkweeds, little white blooms. And if you have a swampy place, if you have a place that stays really wet, then look for aquatic milkweed, which is a native. It's a native milkweed. All these things are on the handout so that you have your names when you go looking for plants. Pentas, we have quite a lot of pentas. At the very far end under the Vitex, we have a pentas called Nova. This is not a pentas that's available too much, unfortunately. It's something that I've been in my perennial garden for years and years. Comes up, it freezes back, it comes up every year, and like all pentas, and you can buy all kinds of pentas at the garden center. It's very attractive to butterflies, and most of them will freeze back in the winter if we have any kind of winter at all.
This is a perennial and this is a regular. Nice little farm. Yeah.
Okay, one of the plants that not too many people know about is porterweed, and we have porterweed in several places.
Coming out of our
Here we go. And I often think that this is not a more simply because of the name, porterweed. Well, it's not, it's not weedy. It's the blue one, and it comes in several colors. Red and pink ones. The blue one is a native to Florida, whereas the red and the pinks are native to South America. So any color porterweed, though, is great for butterflies. And you see it has two little small flowers on that stem. Well, that flower only lasts a day, but then the next day, flower above it opens. So the flowers just proceed up that long stem there, and so there will always be a flower on there for a very long period. And they like to be hot, so we plant them. We have to wait and plant them in May or June, and by September, they're growing like a weed, and definitely one of the very best, one of the #1 nectar plants for butterflies. Usually, if you're looking for this in the nursery, they won't have it until May because it's really sensitive to cold temperatures. It's going to all freeze back in the wintertime. But we have had pretty good success with seed germination. So, I mean, we have them coming up in the garden. This is one reason we're the only people that are allowed to weed in here, because hopefully, hopefully we recognize what we want to keep. Then, of course, we have multiple cultivars of salvia in this garden. Sage is a common name for salvia. Usually the things that are edible, they're calling those sage, but actually they're all salvias. And I think if she's going to get us a sample of the salvia, but when we did some research on what plants are the best for nectaring, salvias came out on top. And oh, the bumblebees and the bees love the salvias. So really and truly, anything you find with the name salvia, you can plant in your butterfly garden. They have the greatest percentage of sugar in their nectar, which is what we find. So overhead, providing a shade, those are passion vines, some of them. Right here, this is passion vine, right here, and right there. And those are the host plants for the fritillary caterpillars. This one here, I'm sure you'll enjoy seeing this one. It's called Aphrodite's Purple Nighty, and was given to us by one of our friends in the Rose Society. So Aphrodite's Purple Nighty is a good attractor. There's a fritillary on it right now. And you see some of the naked stems. That's because the fritillaries were hungry. Yeah, this one got eaten so badly that we had another vine growing underneath it that has now been able to come out. So it's the passion vines, and of course they make beautiful flowers. But again, not the red one won't attract butterflies, but most of the rest of them will. Down on the pillar down here, We have another kind of clerodendron, which is a vine. Marianne is walking down there now. And that is also a clerodendron, and it's called Glory Bower. Glory Bower. There we go, and there's the bloom. And that's a tropical. Sometimes it'll freeze down, but it grows vigorously. And it's related to bleeding heart. You've probably all heard of bleeding heart vine. Well, this is another form, but instead of being having a white center, a white bloom, it has a purple and red bloom. Okay, right over Marianne right now is this yellow flowering plant, which is botanically Muscagnia, but it's called butterfly vine. And the main reason it's called butterfly vine is that the seed pods look like butterflies. So you see the brown seed pods on it? That's the seed pod, and it actually looks like a butterfly. We were a little worried about this one because we didn't know whether or not it would attract butterflies, whether it just looked like one, but we had done some more research and decided, yes, it really does attract them. Now I have an interesting story to relate, something we found out doing research for this program. When we first planted the garden, the designers for the garden had asked us to plant the same vine on all the pillars for purposes of maintenance, is what they said. And so we said, well, I don't think so. Because, I mean, there are too many vines that we need to plant for the butterflies. So in order to satisfy that requirement, we planted Carolina jasmine on both ends. So hanging down over there, Carolina jasmine. Hanging down over here, Carolina jasmine. Well, wouldn't you know, when I was researching, now I'm sure everybody knows, not necessarily, the Carolina jasmine is a poisonous plant. In other words, if you have cattle and they eat Carolina jasmine, they die. So, you know, I figured there weren't any cows around here. Nobody was going to eat the jasmine. But come to find out that honeybees, now remember, honeybees are not native. They come from Europe, and they were brought here to pollinate the plants that were developed in the old world. So they're not native to us. Well, it seems that honeybees, if they nectar on the Carolina jasmine and take that pollen and nectar back to the hive, it poisons the pupas, the baby honeybees. And so, now, this is not going to kill off honeybees because, of course, it has a fairly short bloom period. And the native bees, see, they have enough sense not to nectar. In other words, they're not coming out nectaring at the time the Carolina jasmine is blooming. So the European honeybees, oh, they're not so smart. So in any case, our project for the winter is to tear all the Carolina jasmine off and replace them with some trumpet vines and some other things that we have been wanting to plant that we know are good for pollinators. So, you know, this is the fun thing about gardening of any kind. Every day you see something new and you learn something new. We have quite a few annuals in the garden. One of them is not on, I think I left it off the plant list, I just missed it, which is Gomphrena, or globe amaranth, and it's way down, far down at the end. It's the thing that some in the South they call bachelor buttons, with the little flower that looks kind of like a clover. She's going to get some, but it's a good nectar plant, and they've come out with a new one called Trufula Pink, which we have planted some, and it's a little taller than some of the old dwarfs, and it's a good plant. Then, of course, everywhere through the garden, we have zinnias of various sorts. And, of course, if you plant zinnias, usually by this time of year, they're starting to look pretty ragged. You really should plant two crops. You plant one crop in April and May. When they start looking bad in August, pull them up, plant some more seed. Here's your globe amaranth. Yeah.
This is
Gomphrena, that's the Trufula Pink, yeah. So, we have tall zinnias, and we have some short zinnias, and any kind of zinnia you plant, yeah, is good for butterflies. They like to land on them, particularly the monarchs and the things that like the flat flowers. Is the tithonia blooming? I forgot to check. We have something called Mexican sunflower, which Marianne grew from seed, and it's tithonia is the name for it, and it's an excellent butterfly plant. Yeah, here we go. There's a bloom. And now you can plant those in, I think Marianne seeded that in the middle of the summer, yeah. Very nice. So the last thing I'm going to talk about are the Pentas, which is one of the plants that most people have asked us about because it's kind of unfamiliar. Alan Owens gave me some Pentas seed, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And it's a member of the Mallow family. And unfortunately, Pentas comes into bloom at noon and goes out of bloom at dawn the next day. So do we have any flowers to show? Oh, it's early enough to bloom? Good for it. Good for it. I was thinking.
They're not really open yet, but
Yeah, it looks like a little tiny hibiscus. And as you can see, it makes millions and millions of blooms. It comes in red. Most of them on this side are red, and most of them on that side are pink. And I'm telling you that because we have envelopes, and anybody that wants to harvest some Pentas seed is welcome to do so. Take them from the bottom of the plant where the calyx is brown, and take as many as you want, because trust me, they come up. We actually have to weed Pentas in the spring because about 1 million come up, but they make a real good filler plant for the hot weather. They're actually an Asian weed. They thrive in rice fields, so don't be giving them to anybody that is growing rice. They don't need another weed. And actually, Pentas were grown in Thomas Jefferson's garden. Somehow somebody sent him seed, and so Thomas Jefferson's garden, I think, is the one that sent the seed to Alan Owens. So it's a kind of a historic seed. So, and they get tall. Some of these like 5 or 6 feet tall, and don't have any problems growing. So, here we go. Let me get my keys out of there. Okay, if you want to harvest some seed, Marianne's got some little bags. Help yourself. Thank you all for coming. Enjoyed it.